Hello, welcome to DataTopics Unplugged, your casual corner of the web where we discuss what's new in data every week. From LLM Codegens to software quality, everything goes. Check us out on YouTube. Feel free to reach out with questions. We'll do our best to reply to all of them. Today's February 24th of 2025. My name is Murillo. I'll be hosting you today. Joined as always by my faithful sidekick. Hey, Bart. I wasn't sure about the psychics thing still. And keeping us on the line, keeping us on our toes, Alex behind the screens there.
Hello.
Hey, Alex. How are you? Yeah. How are we doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Nothing special.
It got warmer, but still.
It has gotten warmer and then it started raining again.
Yeah. But this weather is a bit crazy, I feel like. Because like this yesterday, I think it was really warm. But like 3 days ago, it was really cold.
It was like 0.
Yeah, right?
It went to 19.
Yeah. It's a bit crazy. But
it went from dry to rain.
I wonder that's definitely not good for like environment, no? Like the plants and stuff. Because I see some trees like sprouting and stuff.
Yeah.
But then everything freezes again. It's like... How are you doing, Bart?
I'm doing good.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of news topics this week, actually. So we'll be a bit of a different episode, but we still have stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can start with LLM Codegen. What do you use LLMs to generate code these days, Bart?
I do, actually. Quite a bit. I've talked about it before, right?
Yeah, you're yeah, indeed. Well, I think there are degrees to it, right? Like there's having LLMs do the writing, you just prompt and stuff. There's also like the autocomplete, right? Which is kind of looks more like a very smart linter. So yeah, I think people are still navigating how to go about these things. But I see here my LLM Codegen workflow at the moment. This is from Harper Reed. So this is his blog. And he's talking about here, what he does. What is this about, Bart?
It's a link I saw passing by on Hacker News. And it's indeed like it's from Harper Reed. I didn't know Harper Reed. But if you look at the about page, just a picture, like this is something someone that you can trust.
Let's see. Oh, can I just zoom in?
And you just need to click about.
Ah, there we go. Thanks. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He knows how to code, right?
He knows his stuff, yeah. He's at a beach though. Like he's like, he's like
that's a good combo.
Indeed, eh? Indeed. Feels like he has a background on like he's on a Teams call.
Yeah.
And he just has a background. But yeah.
I trust this guy.
I trusted him too. How is his Codegen workflow?
So I went through it and I kind of I think it's more or less how I would explain it myself as well. Although I would use different tools, but I think that's a bit of a matter of taste. So he explains a bit like you have two type of use cases. You have and I think in both use cases this is more advanced like than what you were alluding to, like you just have a fancy autocomplete. Like this is more like really using that as the the 60% of the code that you generate use AI. And he has two approaches, like you have Greenfield, you have nothing, and you need to create something, and you have legacy, like you have an existing code base.
Okay.
Not legacy as an old, but like there is an existing code base.
Okay, so yeah, legacy here is not like something very old, not maintained. It's just something that already exists, and you're trying to modify somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then so for the Greenfield part, like he splits it in a number of steps. First step is ID honing, that you use a conversational LLM to basically start defining the ID of what should this application or this code base be able to do. You start speccing it out. You can also add to that by asking the LLM to ask you follow-up questions, like to me, and to not make it depend on you just like I answered this and this is enough, but also to be a bit critical.
Okay.
He says like he saves it in a spec.markdown file.
Okay.
And then he starts a planning phase where you take the spec and he uses the reasoning model for it to from that spec file basically go to like what all needs to be created.
Okay.
Build a plan to create this basically. And he tries to make it very concrete in a sense, like this plan needs to be translated into to-dos. So he actually creates a to-do.markdown file.
Okay.
So really something very concrete that you can then use again in the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that to-do, you go to the execution where you basically ask an LLM that is well suited for code generation of multiple files to basically start building the skeleton for that.
Okay. Cool. And maybe also, so there are 3 steps that we listed here, right? The idea honing, and he uses GPT-4o or O3. And then the step 2 planning, which he also uses the reasoning models here, right? So O1, O3, or R1. And then for the execution, I think he has Claude.
Well, he mentioned these what he uses, but also like type of tools, because for the execution, like building the initial files, he uses Claude. He also uses Aider, which is like this command line tool to build out, to generate files, basically.
Okay.
But
so
I
it's
think
really-
that like you have a lot of for each of these steps in terms of tooling and models, you have a lot of different options. I think today a safe bet is still very much for all of them Sonnet 3.5.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to the more what he calls the legacy part, which is more there is an existing code base.
Yeah.
Where you want to do iterations, you want to do incremental stuff, where you basically need to have like your LLM needs to have a good context where like what is the project that I'm building. And I think he proposes there also a number of tools that he uses to do this. I'm personally a fan of Cline, CLINE, which is a VSCode plugin. But you have multiple things to do this. But I think the important thing there is like, in order to write relevant code, in order to iterate, you need to be able to have access to the full existing code base and not just access to a file.
So Cline basically, so it's I think this is the one, right, that I have here on the screen. Marketplace visuals. It's basically a VSCode extension.
Yeah.
That will basically parse all the files in your project, or what? What does it do exactly?
It depends a bit. Yeah, so you can. It's very. It's very granular when it comes to giving access to files to do whatever you want to it. Like you can say you have access to read this and this and this file. You can write this and this file. You can also say you have access to everything. Okay. So you could specify this a bit, but indeed, like it's easy for client to build a relevant context for the changes that you want to do, and it will also apply the changes for you in a very managed manner. And like it's you can choose basically what underlying model you want to use. I typically use it with a Claude, with an Anthropic API key.
So your setup is like you have Claude API key, and then you have these tools that plug into your API keys that you have itself. Okay.
And then he mentions like a few challenges. I think those, and that's actually why I think those are interesting to discuss. He calls it. He mentioned here skiing. He says he's over his skis when talking about LLMs, in the sense that when talking about coding with LLMs, in a sense that you have this danger with something like Cline. If you give it all access, like for it to make very big changes, and it's hard to understand what the fuck all happened just now.
Because a lot of stuff changes at once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I see.
Like also like from, if you do this Greenfield approach, like suddenly like you go from nothing to 10 different files where there is logic, like what happened, right? Like if everything seems to work, like okay, nice. But if something suddenly doesn't work, like there can be this big change that is hard to understand. But I think it's at the same point, like you need to get a bit comfortable with that.
With what in particular? With not maybe
for Greenfield at least, I think.
So like being comfortable that you're gonna have a whole bunch of code now that you have to stop and maybe understand, or just accept that there's code there.
You can choose a bit how you tackle that, of course. Like I think if you go take it all the way and you say I don't really care, then you really need to focus on testing this.
Yeah.
Like what is the testing framework that you want to build?
I see. Okay.
So I think that feeling like I'm over my skis with LLMs, I think is an interesting one to discuss. And I think what it links to that very much is his remark on this. This is very much a single player mode.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
I think in single player mode you can get very far, but there are today very little of these tools that allow you to work well in teams. I think the tooling for that is not really mature at this point.
And how would it look for you? Like when you say in teams, what exactly? Because I'm having a bit of a hard time visualizing what is LLM for teams in this case.
So I think typically, let's say you are in Greenfield, what you would do is that you say with a team, someone is going to focus on UI UX, someone is going to focus on that page, on that component, someone is going to focus on that backend component. And now with this prompt, like something generates everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the end responsibilities of maintaining that in an actual larger setting, it's not just a hobby project, like will be spread over a team.
I see.
Like, and how do you do these things, right? Like that.
I see.
I think it's this going from nothing to 60% in Greenfield. Like this is something new, right? Like this wasn't there before.
For sure.
And that is, I think, it's an interesting aspect. Now I don't have any clear solutions there, but I think people that very much use these tools today, I think they are very big opponents on productivity gains. But this is like in real life, you're not in a single player mode.
Yeah, true.
And I think that is something that we still need to figure out a bit.
True. Well,
I thought that was an interesting one.
And you said you have a similar approach to, like, for me, I think some of these things are resonate a lot. I'm definitely not as structured when it comes to the brainstorming, the to-dos. I feel like maybe I have some brainstorming stuff, but I don't ask it to put in to-dos. I just kind of say, I think I need to do this, this, and this.
But do you have you done a lot of these Greenfield things?
Not,
because I think if it's more working on legacy code, you're not going to do that. But like if you structure it like this, if you use Lovable or Bold or something to build an application, like this will really speed you up. Because otherwise you're going to start with a very small, minimally descriptive prompt that will generate something. You need to change that. You need to change that again. Because like through iterations, you notice this is missing. So it really helps like to spend a little bit of time on this phase.
But I agree. I think it was more for me mentioning this is more this is a good idea. Because I think it's more structured. And I think I use it, I think I keep more in my brain.
Yeah.
And we discussed this a bit before that I don't think is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think to kind of say, okay, now write to do tasks. Okay, you need to do this, and this. And I think it would help me in my in organizing as well, and also validating that the steps are what I wanted to do and all these things.
I think also the last paragraph is an interesting one. It's about haterade. I think this is something that you see a lot. Like you have either the extreme tech bros that say the only thing existing a year from now is AI.
Yeah.
Or the other extreme is like, fuck LLMs, they're terrible at everything.
Yeah. Right? It's a very polarizing view towards this, right? It's either I love it or it's trash.
Yeah, and I don't follow either of those extreme stances, to be honest. But I think I personally do very much believe, and I've seen it in the projects that I'm involved in, like it adds a lot of value if you know the tools well, right? And tools are still very young, and there are definitely challenges. We talked about the team. I think we've touched upon before, like what do you do with what impact does it have on the education of someone that is just starting in software engineering and is using these tools? Like, will they understand what is going on? Like, there are a lot of challenges, but I think it's too easy to say, fuck it, they're terrible at everything. Right? I mean,
but I think also these people that are saying that, well, first of all, are they actually turning their backs to LLMs? Because I don't think it's controversial to say that if you are, you're gonna fall behind, at least in terms of productivity. Right. So I wouldn't advise anyone to really turn their back. I think, you can be skeptical but I think you have to, like, the earlier you adopt these things and the earlier you can be productive, I think it's the way forward. Well, you mentioned Cline and you mentioned your workflow. So I don't follow exactly this, but there are a lot of things that resonate with me, like the brainstorming phase, or like how do I tackle this, or Sometimes I have a problem that I know I want to kind of parallelize these things, but I'm not sure how I want to do it in Python, or when I add a queue, like things that doesn't come up very often in my day-to-day, but I know they're possible. So for example, I was trying to stream. So I was trying to do like text to speech, and I wanted to stream the inputs in for OpenAI, but you can have a streaming output for the audio, but you cannot stream the text in, right? So I was like, okay, maybe I can split into sentences and I can pass it in and I play the audio as it comes, right? So I basically make a whole bunch of calls. And I was like, okay, maybe I want to have a queue, so it takes in and then it adds, and then you kind of have like more tasks, and as it does, it goes through. I kind of had an idea what I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly how to tackle it, but like just describing this to O3 or something, it could come up with something that kind of worked and I could test it,
Yeah.
So also brainstorming just to see like, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Am I on the wrong path here?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it definitely helps. So I definitely have used things like this, but to succeed in a very structured way, I think it's really nice. One thing that I do use, I don't use Cline, but I do use Cursor, which is like a VSCode fork. And one of the things that they have is this agents thing. So for example, you can do this inline on the file, but you can also just have as almost like a chat kind of thing, which I think is like this. You see like on the screen.
This is, I think, the a competitor to Cline.
I think so.
Like this, very
I
similar.
think so.
Yeah.
I think so. So, and I think what they do is like whenever you
Cline
want
is
to, it's open source, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever you want to edit something on Cursor, it gives you kind of this diff thing. So it tries to make it easier for you to see what's changed, and you can just accept or decline. So actually, I think this is very helpful. So for example, one thing I use this is I write my Python code, my spaghetti code, and then I have pre-commit hooks that will fail, of course, because it's spaghetti code. And then I'll just copy paste the errors and just put it on this chat and say, hey, fix these errors. And then you will give me this diff, and I can go diff by diff and say, okay, this makes sense or this doesn't. Doc strings, a lot of the times I'm not a big fan because they're very non-informative. They just kind of repeat the function name, right? So then I usually change these things, but I do think it's even in those cases, I still feel like it I gain some productivity there.
Yeah, true.
So cool. Maybe different ways we can take this, but one question that I received last week, and I wanted to bounce this back to you. Someone asked me, what is the best free GPT for coding? And I gave a bit, now looking back on the answer that I gave, because I said like DeepSeek, because yeah, you host it yourself, and I was thinking like Oyama on your machine, and then you can plug it in, and then you do it like that. But they were looking for more like ChatGPT. And
like a chat UI, I mean.
yeah, exactly, ChatGPT, like the actual chat, not the GPT models. And I guess there are other ones like DeepSeek has one, and all these things. But I think for me, I didn't think of ChatGPT at first. Well, one, because yeah, it's free, but they still collect your data and all these things, right? So already, if you're depending on what you want to put there, you have to be a bit more mindful. But I guess for me, the main reason why I didn't think of ChatGPT is because to me, I equate more ChatGPT to Google rather than a coding GPT. And I guess for me now, when I think of coding GPTs, I think of something that lives in my IDE, something that kind of autocomplete stuff for me that can refactor my code. But I was wondering if you share this sentiment when you think of a free GPT for coding. If someone asked you this, what would you answer?
To be honest, I would have to check it out. I don't know what the free tiers are on the major
Yeah,
like chat UI based ones.
but to me, really, like, because you can ask ChatGPT to write some code and you can copy paste stuff, but would you call that a GPT for coding? Because you can also Google stuff and copy paste code from Stack Overflow. For me, it's kind of, for me, the ChatGPT, the UI, it's more like a Google replacement rather than a GPT for coding. At least, like, that's how.
Yeah, I don't really necessarily agree to that. I think you can generate, like DeepSeek, for example, like you can generate decent code, which you don't get from Google search, right?
True.
I mean, you can definitely do something there without being in your IDE.
Yeah, but would you say like DeepSeek, if you go in the UI, wouldn't it be more appropriate to say that it's a general purpose thing? It's not for coding.
I don't know what the exact question is you got.
Yeah,
Depends on the question you got.
just
I don't think there are a lot of like when it comes to coding in your IDE. I think all the major providers they will ask you to pay for. I don't think they have a free tier on their API tokens. unless I'm mistaken.
For ChatGPT. If you go to chatgpt.com, I
So
think.
if you use like for example Cursor or Cline or like if you use this in your ID and you typically need an API token to do that, like you typically need to pay for it. Gemini very shortly had a short-lived free version where you could get an API token, but I think most of them are paid, and so then you need to default to like something running locally on your laptop, which is not impossible. It's not going to give you great performance, I guess.
Yeah, because that's also what I started to think more about that, but I feel like I missed the question.
To me,
entirely.
the question would be like, if you get a question like that, it's like, what do you need to solve?
Yeah.
Right. That is.
Yeah.
Because if you say like, if a person wants to solve them becoming way more productive, then I think the focus needs to be not necessarily how do I do that in a free way, but how do I do that in an affordable way, right? Because
yeah, true. No, but I agree with that. I think, yeah. For me, I think what was surprising is just the realization that the way I'm thinking about these things is very different from other people now. And I'm not sure if I guess for me, I wanted to ask you as well, because I'm not sure if I'm framing things or equating things differently. Like, because I'm thinking of tools, right? Like Google is a tool to do this. Then there's Perplexity, and then there's ChatGPT, and I'm kind of bucketing them on the same place. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm doing a disservice by looking at these things this way. But and now you talked about generating code. You mentioned like it's very new that today you have, I don't know, 20 files, just like bam, right? And now you have to understand.
Boom, bop, bam.
Bing, bop, boom, boom. Anyways, one thing I came across was this article from Sean Kodeki. I'm not sure where he's from. Anyways, to avoid being replaced by LLMs, do what they can't. Have you seen this article? I'm not sure if this article was trendy, but
it's the headline. No, I haven't seen it, but the headline sounds a bit like fear mongering. But
yeah, I think it is a bit. But basically, so he splits. So this guy he splits LLM usage in 3 parts: short term, medium term, and long term. He says in the short term, like learn a bit of AI, use it because get what advantage you can from AI tooling, understand the technical principles behind language models so you can participate in the growing quantity of AI work. I'm not sure how much I agree with the second statement, to be honest, because knowing the basics is good, but I don't know how many people are going to be building new foundational models. And it says acquire status, since it certainly seems like more junior roles will be replaced first. Okay, for me, yeah, maybe, but you could always say this, right? Junior, like medium and senior roles are more valuable, in theory at least. So he says in the medium term, lean into legacy code. So he says, and then this is his view. Huh? So curious to hear what you think. He says that LLMs are good at problems that are technically difficult, to some extent mathematically difficult, but problems that are well defined and well scoped. Solutions are trivially verifiable, and for the total volume of code involved is very low. So he says, let's see where the AI falls short. So instead of looking at where it falls short, let's look at its strengths. And according to him, these are the strengths of LLM models today in terms of coding.
Yeah, okay.
So he says, okay, then the opposite of this would be problems that are ill-defined or poorly scoped, solutions that are difficult to verify, and the total volume of code involved is massive. And he said, when you look at this is for me what legacy code is.
The first part is this is easier. Like these are easier projects. The second part, these are harder projects.
Yeah, I also
like this is.
And I also feel like you can still use LLMs for the second part, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, you can, because I think like what he's saying there, the total volume of code involved is massive. And of course, there are these projects out there, but for most of the massive projects that you will actually work on, in reality, the maintenance of such a code database is distributed among teams.
Yeah.
And the actual amount of code that you yourself need to have in your own personal context is not the full code base, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And you could make that parallel to an LLM as well. Like you don't need to focus on the full code base to make relevant changes. And I think like his point there, like solutions that are difficult to verify. I mean, that's for an LLM difficult. It's for human as difficult, right?
Indeed, I agree. So nothing very surprising. I mean, again,
and I think it's more like this more sounds like bad management. Like if you have solutions that are difficult to verify, should you not spend time on making it easier to verify? Like, do you try testing in place? These type of things, like problems that are ill-defined and poorly scoped. Like, should you not better define and then scope it?
Yeah,
right.
indeed.
Like
Indeed.
I'm wondering, like, is this more of a project management issue than who can work on this issue?
True. Also, the massive volumes of code. He also kind of talks about RAG and he talks about context length and all these things.
And he actually says in his follow-up sentence, like the ill-defined, poorly scoped, the difficult to verify. In his view, this is describing legacy code.
Yeah.
Largely established code bases. And I would even dare to say that like an LLM with a sufficient big context might be up to speed, quote unquote, bigger than someone that's completely new to code base.
But that I agree actually. And I think, we saw mentioned Cline, that you can actually crawl through the things and you can also take the knowledge from learning. And I think, arguably I would rely more on LLMs there to get up to speed and try things than if it was like on the top part, let's say.
I think you can tackle both as very much like what type of tools are you using. And I think what it today still is very much like, even if you use the best tools out there, it's because your self-experience that you can use these things in an efficient way.
True. I think in this post as well, he's really talking about fully replacing software developers by LLMs. So yeah, but again, like you said, I think he says LLMs are good at this, but yeah, this is to me the first step, right? I think if you're good at problems that are well defined, when things are less defined, like you have to be good at things that are well defined to get better at problems that are not as well defined. Because I think the first thing you need to do is make it well defined, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard to see because this technology is going so fast. Like, what will it actually do to replacing, right? Like, isn't it just like a change in the type of activities that you're involved in? Let's take a very simple thing, a UI, and you need a new button with some logic, or you need to change the logic under an existing button, or you need to do a minimal layout change. I think you can argue there, like, if you don't need to write code, if you can just prompt it and it works, let's just assume it works. At some point that it's good enough to do these things. Like, it's not a bad thing, right?
I agree.
But people need to be much more trained in, like, how do you define what is the scope, what are the specifications of this application. Like, people need to be much better trained at these type of things, because that is in the end actually more important.
I think so. And I think even identifying when these things are not mature, right? Like you have a definition, but it's too wide, right? Like, this can be better scoped, right? I think that's I even heard, like, on another post that they were saying that most of the programming happens before you write code, but I guess again depends a bit how you define programming. But I think it's kind of what you're saying, right?
And let's be honest, we're not there. Huh? Like, nothing is fully automated today. Like,
I agree.
I think this is very much thinking about, like, where could we at some point end up, but like today you can't. Like, I had an example the other day. Like, you ask it. It was with Bolt. You ask to generate some utility functions, and even though I have a folder and files with utility functions, it creates a new folder with overlapping functionality, because, like, for some reason it didn't have that in the context. So like, and for this type of things, like, if you ignore this, if you don't know what is going on, like, becomes a very, very hard to maintain code base. Like, this is not an autonomous thing. This is very much today you need to basically very much describe, like, what are you expecting?
True.
What are your specs?
True. So it's almost like you still need the development knowledge to just kind of say, this is exactly what I want for it to do a good job. Because if you're just too vague, and if you just don't know anything about programming, you just ask, you're gonna get something, but it's not gonna be.
And I think honestly the major concern that a lot of people are raising is, like, what if this becomes good enough to just say, I need these specs, Like, how do you get people trained on how
If the
does this-
LLM says I need these specs.
No, if you say I need these specs, it needs to look like this is the functionality, and if the LLM is good enough to generate all that,
Yeah, that's true.
how can you be critical of what is happening? How can you be critical about maintainability? Like, and how can you be trained on these things if you've never seen them?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I think that's an unsolved.
But I also think that even just coming to LLM say I need these specs is already, for me, that would be already we're already in a better place than we are today. Because I think you're already thinking that you need specs.
Yeah.
You're probably saying like you need a, I don't know, contract, right? You understand, like like you can organize the code in different ways that even if this thing needs to be refactored, it's not going to touch everything else. You know, like you. Yeah, to me, I think that's already feels more mature than what we see a lot of the times, right?
And you already see that now, like if you're in the Lovable or in the Stack Blitz, which is the company behind Bolt, if you're in their Discord servers, like you see a lot of questions coming around usage of these tools, and saying, oh, this doesn't work, or the authentication doesn't work, or I get these errors which is clearly like you don't understand what is going on. Like you just need to have a more specific prompt, but they don't understand what is going on because they don't have any programming experience. Like you already see it happening there.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it kind of goes round and round because it's like it looks like you don't need, like it looks like now the knowledge about programming is dispensable, but like if you really take a closer look, it's really not. Right. Yeah, and I think we touched a bit about this as well. He says on the long term, take responsibility. This is from a slide from IBM. A computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never take a management decision. And I think I don't think this is very controversial, but I think he's saying like you're still going to need at least in a company, at least one developer that will take accountability and will direct LLMs and say, this is what needs to be done, that was need to be done, which is, to me, sounds very, it rhymes a lot with your experience with Bolt, right? You say, do this, okay, this is not good. Because you can also see like, build this thing and then a junior developer, instead of trying to understand the code that was on the utility function, just creates a new one and creates overlapping functionality. It's like, no, actually, this is not what I want, right? And I think it is a bit more experienced view to say, I don't want to create new dependencies and have duplication because I want this to be clean. You know, I want this to be isolated. I want to know where the code is organized and all these things. So yeah, so there you go. Those are according to him, to avoid being replaced, LLMs do what they can't. Some things I think are pretty commonplace. Some things are a bit more insightful, I would say. And
I think the core of the message is like, if there is something new coming up in the space that you're actively working in, try to learn what it is and use it.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it would be more helpful to think of these things as tools, right? Because like you said, you learn it and use it.
Yeah.
Right. But AI today still is very much anthropomorphized. Oof, that's a mouthful.
It's gonna be the agent that runs your life.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, and unintentionally, this is something that I had also put here. The wired brain, how to not talk about an AI-powered future. This is from Inish, from Explosion, Inish Montani. She's one of the authors of Spacey.
Okay.
So she does a lot of talks. Well, I don't know how much she does, but I know she's done a lot of talks, and sometimes she likes to talk a bit about her process about creating the slides and all these things. So this post is more about using the traditional AI images, the brain.
This is an old post as well. Huh?
Yeah, it is.
2017.
Yeah, but she did talk about it. She did reference this because actually I found this post via another post.
It was a recent reference. Okay.
But I thought it was interesting. Well, one, because she talks about, you can see.
I'm allergic to the images that you're showing here.
Yeah, but that's exactly what she's saying. Don't do it. So for people that are just listening, these are basically the brain on chips kind of thing, right? The robots. And if you look up AI or machine learning on stock images and all these things, that's probably the images you're going to find. TLDR for this is basically says just don't do it. Like if you're going to talk about AI in healthcare, then it's better to bring a healthcare image than this very generic things. She also says that this also promotes the to look at AIs as humans, which doesn't help as well. And then she talks about like Imagineering. And this is what I thought it was kind of interesting. So these are images from 1900s of how people imagine life in the 2000s would be. And then there's like a robot sweeper, I guess.
Yeah, basically you're a robot vacuum.
Exactly. And then you had firefighters with wings that could put out.
Oh, nice. We still don't have the wings, huh?
Still don't have the wings, but she argues that
I would prefer the wings above AI, though.
That would be cool, huh?
If I could just choose for myself.
Yeah.
Like, do you want access to Claude or do you want a pair of wings?
That would be cool, huh? The wings would be...
Yeah, I would go for the wings.
I would go for the wings as well. I think it would make my quality of life, more. Anyways, but she does say also like this is not that far from what we see today in the sense that we have a problem of keeping the floors clean and we have the robot vacuum cleaners, and then there are drones that can also help put out fires, right? So if you think of that's the problem here, and she also talks about we cannot really imagine what the future is because we're really trying to imagine the future with what we have today, and we're trying to imitate the human behavior to solve these problems, right? Another example, so she said back in the 1950s, there was a job that was knocker-uppers, which was basically someone that would come and knock your window or your door at a certain time to wake you up. And then, and she says, nowadays this job is obsolete, right? It's for, there are alarm clocks for it. So this job was replaced, but it wasn't replaced by a window knocking machine, right? So, and I think this kind of, I feel like when we talk about AI, and I think that's the point that she's bringing here, AI has a PR problem. Whenever we're talking about AI, we think of a little intelligent being. We also assume that if we can do things that we consider hard today, like painting in a Van Gogh style or something like that, we subconsciously also assume that it can do everything that's easier than that because we equate it to a human, right? So if an LLM can write code, then it can also speak English because we speak English before we write code. And if you can write code, if you can speak English, then it can probably read poetry or whatever, And I think it kind of creates a cascade of things, like a layer upon layer upon layer, that we think that because we're on this top layer here, everything below is also conquered, which is not true. So, in the end, she basically says, the way we communicate is powerful, shapes the perception of the world. So let's be careful about when we use AI and we equate it to humans, and stop using the fucking wired brain illustration.
I agree. I don't necessarily agree with the statement that there's a PR problem. Like, it depends a bit on what you define as a PR problem, because I think the most hyped thing ever is AI.
Yeah.
Maybe the challenge, but I think that goes for all hypes, like the actual what is under the hype and understanding what is under the hype is lost a bit in the hype.
Yes, but say more about that.
Like, I think what people like, there is such a big hype that even people that have nothing to do with technology think AI will take over our jobs.
Yeah, true.
Without really understanding, like, where are we today? What is likely going to be the future? Like,
but I think that's the bit of the thing, because people that think that they're going to take our jobs is because they see an AI coding and they think like, coding is more difficult than X, and if I do X and he can do coding, then he probably can do X, because coding is harder because it's a person.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a tool. Right. It's like to say, no one says a calculator is smarter than a calculator is going to take jobs, because if you can do arithmetic, the humans cannot, because I think we really see it as a tool. And I think AI, there's still this thing that the words we use, like agents, reasoning, artificial intelligence, right? I think all these things really support that image.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I feel like never like the terminology, but it is what we are stuck with today. Now more on the techie things. You know UV, right, Bart?
I know UV.
We mentioned hype. UV has also been very hyped for a while.
Yeah, maybe you need to explain what UV is.
UV, for people that
UV.
UV, yeah. People that are in the Python space, you can think of like a poetry competitor, a hatchling competitor. Basically, it's a package manager.
Competitor.
Pip competitor, indeed. So
Virtual
basically,
env competitor.
yeah, it's a tool that bundles a lot of stuff. It can manage your virtual environments, your dependencies. It can package your code. You can manage your Python versions, your Python tooling, so even pipex alternative. It's from a company called Astro that also created Rough, which is tooling written in Rust. So you use UV or no?
I do, yeah.
I think I use UV as well, but I know I'm also hesitant to suggest because Python packaging has been changing, historically changed all the time. Right, like poetry, then
Yeah,
PDM,
but
then
I think it makes
hatch, and
sense
all
to
these things.
suggest now.
I think so, and that's the thing. So that's why I wanted to bring it now. This is an article from who is this? I don't know who this guy is. Forgot his name. Sorry about that. It's bytecode. So bytecode.dev. A year of UV pros, cons, and should you migrate? And yeah, subtitles, yes, probably. So I was already surprised that it's been a year. So this is from February 15th. So it's been already a year of UV, and it looks like it's still ahead of the other competitors.
Has it only been a year?
That's according to him, yes.
It's only been released a year ago. Oh wow, it feels much longer.
Right, but I think it's been like there's no skepticism still. I feel like people are still very confident about UV. Most people are still saying UV should be your default choice, right? Which it wasn't the case for previous package managers, in my opinion.
I think it depends a bit on the bubble that you were in, but
potentially. So basically says he waited a bit before he can bring his opinions because he wanted to see how using UV would feel like and all these things. I'll just go a bit to the conclusions, but I will just mention one thing before that I thought it was interesting. He said that UV, the way that they tackled UV, they really tackled trying to first replace pip and then virtual environments and pip tools. And according to the author here, this reflected a respect for the community and to try to adhere to the community standards. So it was a bit like I'm trying to do something for Python, because I'm not doing something what I want. And I think even the inline dependency management that he brought, maybe it's in that spirit, right? So he also praised UV in that sense, right? Like package managing, like yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. I'm gonna try to really take it all in and really try to be the package manager for Python, not what I want it to be. So the article also talks about everything that UV can do for you. So installing Python versions. He also talks about a few tricks. So for example, if you do UV run with Jupyter Notebook, yeah, so UV run with Jupyter, you can basically run launch Jupyter Notebook without having to install in your dependencies. So he talks a few tricks here and there. When it fails, so he talks about the cache problem because UV tries to be very fast in a lot of different ways. So whenever he pulls a dependency, he'll try to cache it for you. And he says using this, he actually took 20 gigs of his MacBook. But in the conclusions, when should you not use UV? He says there are basically 5 situations where you should not use UV. When you have a legacy project that where using UV to resolve dependencies will not work, or you cannot afford the mess for the purpose of migrating. So basically, you have a project that has another thing you don't want to change. Okay, you're in a corporate environment that will not let you use it. You don't trust it yet because it's not a stable version, and I think this is still true. Like UV is like not a 1.0 technically, and also because it's part of Astro, which is a for-profit company, and you don't know what your commercial offering will be. They also mention if you need a specific Python version that UV doesn't have, because you can download Python versions with UV, but it only goes back a certain amount of time, right? And if you think the CLI is too big of a showstopper for the team. So basically the team is very familiar with using other tools and switching to another tools. Of all these arguments, to be honest, I think, yeah, legacy, I understand if you don't have standards, right? Because a lot of these other tools also have Python standards that you could still migrate the tools and you can still use this stuff. Corporate environment, okay. Not trusting it, I get the argument, but I don't feel like it's a big deal because it's open source, right? Even if they close source it, someone would just have a fork of it, right?
I think it really depends on what you're building. Like if it's if you're building something Greenfield that you'll probably refactor completely a year from now, like you don't really care about. There is no stable version. Like there's so big of a community behind UV. Like it's good enough now. If you're working on a legacy code base that has been there for 10 years and needs to be active for the coming 20, you're probably not going to do this with a tool that just exists for a year, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true.
To me, that is really like does it matter at this point? Like maybe it brings a big back to the one I don't know, what was it with the doors? One-way doors versus two-way doors.
Yes. What is that?
Like I think it comes from Amazon, right?
Yeah, I think from Jeff Bezos. Yeah.
So if you like, is this a choice that you go to the door? Can you go back through the door to undo it? Basically, that's the thing. And if you're in a greenfield situation and you're gonna refactor, and you don't know yet what you're building completely anyway, it's easy to go back and change a package manager. If this is something that is super core to your company and it needs to be stable down the line, like going back incurs a lot of risk. Like you can doubt whether or not that is a two-way door then, right?
Yeah, but
the two-way door becomes very expensive.
Yeah, but because UV is still a tool in the end, right? And for example, one thing that it changes your pipe project automo. But you can still read that with other tools, right?
You can say it like that. That's indeed the easy thing. But if you're working on this with a team of let's say 40 people, they all have their developer environment. Like it's more than just a file that it generates, right? Like it creates virtual environments. Here it has an impact on your CI. Like it's a big job to change everything. Like if you're working on a large scale application, right?
Yes, but I think, well, it is a change, but to me, it doesn't feel like as expensive change as to say we're going to use polars instead of pandas, for example, or we're going to use this database or that database. Because in the end, it's like you still have virtual environments, which is still a .venv file there. The PyProject.toml has nothing that is UV specific for now, at least, right? You have the dependencies, dev dependencies, you have groups. These are all PEP standards, right? Yeah, like I agree that maybe your workflows, if you use this tool in CI, there is some change there, but or the log file for that matter. So there are a few things that change, but I feel like it's in the end it's really just like it's a tool that adheres to standards. So I think
for you, because you're very savvy on these things,
and that's the thing that I was also wondering, because I also proposed using UV with another project, and they were using poetry, and they said, well, maybe we shouldn't migrate to UV because the idea is that everyone can just jump in and use the tools that we have. And in my head, it's like, yeah, but in the end, we have virtual environments. It's just that poetry puts it somewhere other place. Like the concepts are all the same.
Yeah, but for you, because you're very savvy. Like, but this requires education of a team. Like, it's. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it.
No, I know.
I'm just thinking about like what is the impact? Like, is this a one-way or two-way door?
Yeah.
And like, but this like is even this is maybe a different situation from the one-way versus two-way door, because the two-way door is more as like, what is the long-term viability of a project like UV?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
If you at some point you say, as well as doing something shitty with the commercial, but you want to move away, like that is expensive. But yes. Like there's also like every change incurs a cost. Like, and then you need to evaluate, like, do we believe more in UV versus poetry? And if so, like, and there are good arguments for that. I think like you can find a lot of arguments for that. There's also an argument to say you want to explore what new evolutions are, because it's important to stay a bit ahead of the curve. But it's not as simple as changing a code, like a piece of code on your laptop. Like there's a team involved. You have people involved that are not typically looking at different type of things, and that see this just as a tool, but they need to be educated.
But then also the other question there, like if you're using poetry for a long time, but you still have a hard time switching out of it, I think it's probably because poetry abstracts a lot of things, and maybe you don't understand what's happening under the hood.
It doesn't even need to be poetry. It can be just something as simple as pip. Like it's just a change, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Just a change of whatever.
And I also agree that there's a change in the way of work. Like even using LLMs, I talked to some people. They're like, yeah, like it doesn't really get in my flow of coding. Like, and I understand that changing the way you do things has a cost.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't know. I mean, and also if we talked about this like a year from now, or like 6 months or 8 months ago, I would also say maybe let's wait a bit, because Python, like I was saying, we should switch to Rye, like right before UV came out, and then UV came out. I was like, okay, now we switch again to this,
Yeah.
like, and it's also a bit weird to kind of say, okay, we have to always switch. It always feels like, okay, you're constantly learning a new workflow, right? I also understand that, but I really feel like today, maybe the argument of Astro being a for-profit company, but even then, I don't see a lot of good arguments to not use UV, even if it's just to build a community. So we're all using the same thing. We all think that this is the way to go to adopt the PEP standards and this and this and that. Would you ever, if someone's starting a project, say, what should I use? Would you ever not say UV, and when?
If you were starting a new project,
Yeah,
today I would use UV.
But like if
But
someone
a year ago would have said something else, and 2 years ago would have said something else, or maybe a year from now we'll say something else.
Yeah.
That is where we're at with package management.
And would you say that it was as a mistake to say UV today, if next year you say something different?
For a new project, no. I think it's okay.
Okay.
I think what would change is like if something like the Python Software Foundation would adopt UV.
Yeah, I think that would be
from the moment that there's like it's officially part of the Python Software Foundation. Like it becomes also easy to bring this argument like we need to switch legacy stuff to this. It's worth the value because like there will be support going forward.
Yeah.
From something that has existed way, way, way longer than Astro, right?
Yeah, I agree. No, but that I fully agree. I think I'll be happy if it goes under the PSF, the Python Software Foundation. You wouldn't.
Yeah, it would, but I don't think it would happen. But
I don't think it would happen either. Maybe another side note. This is written in Rust. Do you think this poses a problem at all, or?
In what sense?
That Python is written in C, so the core developers are C savvy. You can say that there's a.
I don't know.
Okay, I don't think there's a big problem, to be honest.
But at this stage, definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So would you agree with this? Always try UV first. If that doesn't work, which is very rare, go back to what you did and find.
But yeah, for a new project, fully agree. Yeah.
Okay. I think we can agree on that then as well. What else? Maybe a bit more on the tech corner. Maybe a library actually. So when you make REST API requests, there was Postman, and I think Postman there's some restrictions now or something. I think Postman was very popular as a tool to make requests and save environments and save credentials and organize your requests to test things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I recall correctly, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Postman now changed the license or something, so you couldn't just use as freely as you could before, maybe for work environments or something. Maybe it was like Docker deal. I don't know.
I don't know.
What do you use today if you need to test REST API calls?
It changes a bit around.
Oh, really?
To be honest, I've used CLI stuff. I've used Postman and alternatives. I've used Chrome extensions. So I don't really have a.
Interesting. Because someone.
I personally tend to gravitate towards UI stuff.
And what do you use for UI stuff? Postman.
Well, I've used Postman, but it's not Postman I'm using currently. I forgot the name.
Is it
I can.
this one? Because I remember it. Bruno?
No.
Bruno.
I've seen Bruno, yeah, but it's not Bruno.
Why don't you use Bruno? Maybe just don't like the dog.
I don't use like it. No. It's not something. This is not something I'm doing every day.
Okay.
So I'm also not evaluating it every day.
Yeah, I was talking to a colleague and he was really advocating for Postman. Because you can save like different directories, you can save different variables and all these things, and he was really
and it's very good for Postman is very good for team-based development, so you can very easily share like types of things that you want to test against and this kind of stuff. So.
But for me, indeed, it doesn't come up as often that I was really like, oh yeah, now I'll use Postman and now let's figure out the UI and let's see how to do this. Because a lot of the times I tried to use these tools like Bruno or Postman, but in the end I just kind of went back to curl because I was just doing this, like it's very ad hoc.
Yeah, it depends really what you're doing. Yeah. But I mean, if you're building a backend server that is exposed via an API, you're probably testing against your local API server a lot.
True.
These type of things, right?
True. This also came up when I was looking from Darren Burns. I think he's from the textual team. So that's Python TUIs from textual. Which is a power of HTTP client that lives in your terminal. So kind of like a TUI thing. So I thought it looked nice. I think in the end it's just you can also have environments and variables, but everything is on files. So you can still save very easily and share these things as well. So yeah, I thought it looked cool. And I think this is a type of application that maybe makes sense to stay in the terminal, because for me at least, I use curl, which is already in the terminal. So maybe if I want something a bit more fancy, then I can still use the TUI for this. Even though, to be honest, not sure I will use it until I actually need it.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't even know when I would need it.
Yeah, looks cool.
Looks cool, right?
To me, it's a very personal thing. So these you have a lot of these tools. You also have a very cool one to do SQL queries against the data. It's like basically like a TUI version of dbeaver. And I always try them out. And I think it works very well. Like if like you're using this 50% of the time.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I use this like intensively for a day, and then I don't use it a week. It's more like that. And like when you're then not in a UI setting, but more in a terminal setting, like in a terminal, like the shortcuts are always different, and you need like half the time you need to spend learning these key shortcuts.
Yeah.
And like it's not worth it. Like the trade-off is not worth it to me. Like if you know them, you're going to be way more efficient.
And you will know them if you use them a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I see what you're saying. I think TUIs are kind of nice, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes I think people build stuff on the terminal just to build stuff on the terminal. Like it wouldn't be. But I mean, nothing against it. But I'm wondering still if there's this type of application should always be in the terminal because it's better. But yeah, maybe. What else? Do we have time for one more? I think we have time for one more. Maybe this is on software quality. It's a bit short. Well, it's a summary from a paper, but I'm not gonna go over the whole thing. It's just describing. When we talk about software quality, I do sometimes wonder, how do you measure quality? Like, especially now that
it's hard, huh?
As I get more experience, I feel like people look at me more to kind of say, okay, this is good, this is not good, what should we do, what should we not do? And then there was a paper from Google trying to describe what software quality is.
Interesting.
And maybe I'll go, so I have an image here on the screen that says process quality, arrow to the right, code quality, arrow to the right, system quality, arrow to the right, and product quality. I'm going to go a bit backwards. So according to the paper, they say product quality is like if you build a product, right? Like you have, I don't know, something, what your users think. Like when you make a change, is this a good change? You change the UI, you have a new recommender algorithm. Do the users like it or not? Hard to measure sometimes, right? You can do a lot of A/B testing, but it's not very easy. It's a bit outside your control.
But I'd argue it's the only thing that's relevant.
Indeed. And that's why I wanted to start, right? Like this is the important thing. So it's like, ideally, this is what you should know, but it's very hard to really get a feel, and but that's the idea. Then you have system quality, which they mention here: defect rate, reliability, performance, security, and privacy. So how often do things break? How often things are not operational? How often do you need to go there and do a hot fix or something? Which you can measure way more easily, but at the same time, it doesn't happen very often, right? It's very sporadic. So how can you test for these things? How can you make sure that this change will decrease this failure rate? All these things. Then they have code quality, which is what a lot of people think of software quality. Like they think of maintainability, complexity, testability, readability. Which it's a bit subjective still, but like you can argue that these things are best practices. These things have followed the standards and all these things. And then on the left, the process quality. So they actually talk about how do you write code, right? When you write code, do you have tests? Do you have CI? Do you have pre-commit hooks? Do you have what's the strategy? How do you distribute work, right? Do you have peer reviews? And this thing is like the easiest thing to measure, right? Like how much time does pull request stay hanging and all these things. And what I thought it was interesting here as well, that they according to the research, improving, even if you improve any of these things, right? But like even if the process quality, you enforce more the review process, the checks and all these things, there are trends or correlations that lead to everything down the line. So for me, at least when I read this, it kind of felt like this is ideal, but it's not easy for us to measure these things. But even if you just control the things you can, which is the quality of the process in itself, everything will also improve. Everything tends to improve. You're not convinced?
I think it's a very fine balance between these things.
Say more.
Like, I think you could spend a lot of time on code reviews. You can spend a lot of time on maintainability, on making code less complex, on making it more testable, on making it more readable, on making it more comprehensible, and not add a single value for your users.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that is a really, like, it's very much like it's dangerous to look at any of these things in isolation.
It's true.
Or to go too far and like take code reviews as an example. I think we've all been in situations where there is a code review process because there is a code review process, and then basically the review process is, this a second engineer needs to look at it and needs to approve it, and then what happens in practice? Maril, I'm going to send it to you, just approve it, and go to prod.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been in these situations, so like I think all of these things are important. I think it's also an interesting way to think about it, like process quality, code system, and product quality. But it, well, to me, by far the most important one is product quality, and don't look at them in isolation. I think all of them are important, but I think it's a danger to focus too much on one of them.
Well, yeah, I agree.
And I think especially engineers tend to focus very, very, very much on the parts before user experience.
Do you think engineers have a tendency to be more narrow vision or tunnel vision, and it's harder for engineers to take a step back and look at the broader picture, like why are we doing these things?
But I think that is why you work as a team, and like what you need is in the team is also people that really look at this from a product management point of view. Like, what is it that you're actually building? Like, you don't just want to build the best mobile app, you want to make the most useful mobile app, right?
Yeah, true.
That is, I think, and I think that is something that you also, when you build teams, like, you need that diversity as well to be represented correctly.
I agree. And I also think,
and there, of course, like, it interlinks very much, because if you have your process, your code, your system quality in place, and you want to add a new feature, it's going to go quickly.
Yeah.
So it's very much linked, right?
Yeah, indeed.
But you can't, like, it needs to be in balance.
And I also think that if you add metrics for these things, I wonder if the action of adding a metric to code quality, for example, defeats a bit the purpose. Because like then you start focusing on the code quality and you don't focus on the thing that actually matters. I feel like there's some metrics that are interesting to keep an eye on, but when they become the goal, they become bad metrics, because the metrics can look really good, but that, for me, that just means that you're focusing on the wrong thing.
I think you see this a lot with open source projects. So you're not gonna, and I'm talking a bit in extremes here, of course, but typically people don't open source until the test coverage is 100%.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And you're just gonna build your useful tests, and then you're gonna have, like, for your, like, this is what we definitely need to test, this is our core functionality. Probably you're testing on like 60-80%.
Yeah.
But you're gonna optimize, because, like, that means everybody's gonna see this, so I need code quality. So you're just gonna assess, like, which are the lines that are not covered yet, and you're gonna write some easy tests to also cover them.
Yeah, that's true. Huh?
Like, and it, like, shows a bit like maybe that time should have gone to user experience, for example.
Indeed, but like code coverage is a very good example, because you can have 100% code coverage and have shitty tests.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, true. I fully agree. Maybe also on that, and one thing that triggered for me, at least, and this is more side projects. So maybe this is not, is like the extra things that I want to do that are not the big chunk of my work, my day, and all these things. And I'm starting to switch my mind. I used to think that, well, I didn't used to think, but I started my career and I know I wrote a lot of shitty code, right? And then the idea was like, okay, I need to write better code.
I still do.
Yeah, but I'll get to that.
Yeah.
And then like you get a bit more experience and you can write code. And then sometimes you write some piece of code, like you write a project, like, man, this looks nice. This is what I wanted to do, right? And you're really happy. And then I find myself like, I want all the code that I write to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So
yeah.
it's like, and then I'm also going back, it's like, okay, maybe it's fine to just hack things up. It's fine to write spaghetti code and just like, it works, like, again, I think there's a bit of a difference. So, and I think we talked about with LLMs as well. I think it's okay to write shitty code, but with different eyes on it. Like, it's okay to write shitty code about this function, but you know that this function does, and you don't have a whole bunch of dependencies. You're not setting variables that are global and this and this. Like, it's a different type of shitty code, and you know that if you need to rewrite it, you can just go ahead and just rewrite this and that. Like, you know where it's at. And actually, I think it's quite okay, right? Especially because it's much better to write shitty code and make progress on a project and then go back and refactor it, than to say, no, everything I need to write is perfect and then not go anywhere. And I think the same thing goes with like the unit test that you mentioned, code coverage.
Yeah, I think definitely for personal projects, like to me, I also have the same view. Like,
yeah,
I think it's better to, like, I think thinking about like from the 10 ideas you have, probably 90% are never going to get anywhere. So it's better to just hack it together, see if it sticks, if it's valuable, and then improve on that. Because if you're gonna put your standards too high, you're probably never gonna get to completion. That's
yeah, true. And I'm also even wondering.
But I think it's also a personal thing. Like, I want to try the 10 things and 9 things will fail. And also have that approach, like, you can only do that if you hack things together. But if you want to have it, this is my goal, my singular goal, and I want to do it in a perfect way. I mean, it's just a different way of tackling things, right?
Yeah, but even now I'm wondering now, even for work, right? So projects that you work in a team that needs to be, maybe it's okay as well to hack some things up, but still write it in a way that you can go back and refactor easily. So I think there are like some decisions that you need to stop down. It's like, okay, if I make this change here, or if I hard code this variable here, it's going to be very hard for someone to find this needle in this haystack, right? But maybe there are some things that's like, it's fine. Like, yeah, okay, maybe there's a better way. I don't need to write this 3 times nested for loop, but it works for now, and I know what the function does, and maybe I can break it down later. This is okay spaghetti code, right? And I'm starting to reflect more a bit on this, because sometimes I'm like, even when I'm reviewing code, I look at something, I was like, oof, that's really, I wouldn't do that. Like, this feels very hacky. Like, what you're trying to do there, I can think of 5 different better ways, to more cleaner ways to write this. But maybe it's okay because I still know what it does, and I still know that I could refactor this one function to everything else,
But of course, like, it's a bit of there's an educational component to it as well. Huh? Like, if you know it can be improved, and like, if you know, like, these are the ways to improve it, that's fine. If you're hacking it together because that's the only way you know.
Yeah, indeed.
That's also.
Indeed. And that's kind of goes back a bit to, like, I feel like in the beginning I was hacking things up, and now I feel like I know it better, but now I'm going back to hacking things up. But that doesn't mean that I'm going back to the starting point.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think the eyes you have on it is different. So yeah. Cool. Maybe one last quite quick thing. One thing I thought it was funny. I'm not sure if you saw. I shared this on our internal Slack as well. It was C# for Gen Z.
No.
Alex, I think you can get into coding after this. So it's a tweet or X or no. As a way to encourage younger generation to try out programming, most of our keywords in C# have been permanently renamed. This should increase the amount of younger game developers coming in the next few years. It's like, instead of public float Riz is high key period Riz. Instead of private bool is low key facts. So instead of bool, you have facts. And then isas. And then instead of a try catch, you have a fuck around and find out. If is vibe check. Return becomes it's giving. True is no cap. And return, false is cap. And then you have an exception, which is T. And then instead of debug.log error is shoutout.spill T. And then instead of throw is yeet. I thought it was pretty cool. Do you get this?
I think this is something that Gen X would find really funny, and that Gen Z would find this very cringe.
I don't know. Let's check. What do you think? What is this? What say you, Alex?
I mean, I don't use slang, so for me, I don't know.
Okay.
I just thought it was funny, I guess.
Okay. Maybe not.
This looks like a dad joke.
You think so?
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. Maybe I'm okay. Wow. Wow. Okay. Someone also made a comment that they should replace the semicolon with FR, like for real. Okay. Maybe it was just me then. All right. We can edit this out, Alex. It's okay.
No, it's funny, Marilla. It's funny.
Thanks, Bart. I think I'm okay too. I think we had one more thing, but we can keep it for another time. See, we weren't over our usual length. Anything else that you wanted to bring up? Any shout outs? Anything?
I don't think so.
Anything from you, Alex? You sure?
Yeah.
Nothing from the news you want to cover and you bring up?
No.
Okay.
Can you do a Gen Z closing? Goodbye? Like, you have some slang you can throw in
Yeah.
for the
No,
goodbye?
I think Marilla's better at that.
Okay.
But I'm technically Gen Z or no?
From what year are you?
I think it's until 1997.
I think that I am then. And you're from?
Okay.
2000.
You're from
you can
2000?
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gen Z closing.
No, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT for this.
No.
I don't know, Bart. You just call me a dad for laughing at this joke. I feel very shy now. I feel very insecure. So maybe we just call it like this.
Okay. We come back to this another time.
Yes, I'll prep something. I'll do some market research, see what the kids are using these days, and then I'll come back to it. Thanks a lot, everyone, for listening. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.
You have taste in a way that's meaningful to software people.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates.
I would recommend TypeScript. Yeah, it writes a lot of code for me, and usually it's slightly wrong.
I'm reminded, incidentally, of Rust here.
Thus,
Rush.
this almost makes me happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
Kuber and Nex.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about large neural networks. It's really an honor to be here.
Rust.
Data topics.
Welcome to the Data.
Welcome to the Data Topics podcast.